Coming up, we have the story of a Native Hawaiian nonprofit tackling invasive species while preserving a traditional way of life. Plus, Congress has voted out the Speaker of the House, a first in U.S. history. We learn about the players involved and what it could mean for Indigenous communities. We have those interviews, plus headlines ahead on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The ICT Newscast is sponsored by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving American Indian nations and people in the recovery and control of their rightful homelands. On the web at iltf.org.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amadawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today in Alaska, where someone has received the longest ever sentence for a violation of the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. 59-year-old Chris Rodrigo has been convicted of selling products made in the Philippines and marketing them as authentic Alaska Native artwork. That is in direct violation of the federal law, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act, which makes it illegal to sell any craft falsely suggesting it was Native made. For almost 5 years, Rodrigo and his family owned and operated 2 shops, Alaska Stone Arts and Rail Creek in Ketchikan, Alaska. They mainly sold stone carvings and wooden totem poles, which were shipped to the U.S. from a Philippine-based company also owned by Rodrigo and his wife. In 2019, the company sold over $1 million worth of sales. Rodrigo will now serve 2 years in federal prison. He is also required to make a $60,000 donation to the Central Council of the Tlingit and Haida, plus write a letter of apology to be published in the Ketchikan Daily newspaper and serve 3 years of supervised release. Well, tribal nations on the mainland are helping to pitch in for the Indigenous communities who were devastated by the wildfires on the island of Maui in Hawaii. So far, both the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians in California and Sandia Pueblo in New Mexico have chipped in. San Manuel has made a $125,000 contribution to the American Red Cross, while Sandia Pueblo pledged a whopping $1 million to the Maui Strong Fund of the Hawaii Community Foundation. Sandia Governor Stuart Paisano said in a statement that his tribal nation is steadfast in its commitment to assist Native Hawaiians during this time. Earlier this week, some residents of Lahaina were finally allowed back into their neighborhoods to see what is left of their homes. The wildfires have killed at least 97 people and is marked as one of the nation's deadliest disasters. Now to Chiapas, Mexico, where violence is oppressively affecting Indigenous communities. Since the start of the current Mexican presidential administration in 2018, there have been more than 150,000 homicides and more than 90 assassinations of Indigenous activists and land defenders. The violence has led to the Zapatista National Liberation Army, also called EZLN, protesting the violence and forced displacement against them. The organization serves as an advocacy group of autonomous Indigenous communities, calling for the reclamation of ownership over the lands taken from them, as well as a better distribution of wealth across Mexico. An EZLN statement signed by 1,000 people, including the actor Diego Luna and Professor Noam Chomsky, claims the organization is under attack from paramilitary groups who, quote, act with the passive and active complicity of the authorities. According to a report from the human rights group FREBA, Chiapas is overrun by organized crime with evident links to government and companies. EZLN and FREBA say these attacks are happening to make way for government projects as a way to regain territory recovered by the EZLN in 1994. Well, back in the U.S., fans are saying farewell to a beloved series. Reservation Dogs came to an end last week after 3 seasons on Hulu and FX. The show, which first started in August 2021, followed a group of 5 teens growing up on a reservation in Oklahoma. It has since made household names out of the main actors Devery Jacobs, Paulina Alexis, DeFaro Wunatai, and Lane Factor. The almost all-Native crew and writers tackled some tough issues throughout the series, such as boarding schools and suicide, but often choosing to take a lighter look at life. In a post on Instagram, showrunner Sterling Harjo thanked fans for the messages, memes, and love the show received following the finale. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. The Canadian government is calling drug overdoses from opioids like fentanyl a public health crisis. In Winnipeg, Manitoba, the community began a walk to raise awareness about the risks of illegal drugs. Here's Colleen Rajat with the story.
You could feel the anger, sadness, and loss. Many of these people have lost a loved one to an overdose. They want young people to use this phrase if they are offered illegal drugs.
No thanks! I'm good!
Joe Foree organized this awareness march after he lost his son Harlan to fentanyl poisoning. He says his son was not addicted to drugs. He worked as a roofer, loved the Winnipeg Jets hockey team, and was only 31 years old.
Why is this so important to you?
I'm good! I don't want anybody else to feel what I'm feeling. I'm good! We've lost enough youth. We've lost enough of our people. And it's just not our people. You know, this drug does not discriminate who it takes.
In 2022, there were 418 deaths here in Manitoba. On average, that's at least 1 death per day. Recent data shows deaths are still 67% higher than they were pre-pandemic. In 2021, fentanyl was detected in more than 300 samples of seized drugs. That's 3 times higher than a few years before. And another serious sign. Take-home naloxone kits that can reverse an opiate overdose are being distributed in record numbers. In 2021-22, the Manitoba government distributed 17,000 free kits, more than double from the previous year.
I pray that each and every one of us who have lost someone to this devastating tragedy, that our loved ones in heaven bring us comfort and strength to help us grieve in the most healthiest way, and to give our hearts strength so that we may march and walk throughout our life's journey with them being remembered, their stories being heard.
The rising numbers of fentanyl poisoning and deaths in our communities is a grave concern. This is a crisis that has inflicted unimaginable pain and suffering upon our families, upon our parents, upon our brothers, our sisters. It is not only our duty, but Canada's duty to raise awareness and take meaningful steps to address this urgent issue.
Joe Foree says the law has to be changed to make drug dealers accountable.
So I'm hoping throughout the course of this summer and next weeks that I get to have meetings with the people that work in here so that we can start talking about some real solutions when it comes to fentanyl. When fentanyl dealers, I believe fentanyl is the only drug that should carry a life sentence.
The Manitoba government recently announced $625,000 to assist and expand addiction programs. $200,000 of that money is going towards more naloxone kits. People here who are grieving their loved ones say way more is needed to combat this crisis. In Winnipeg, Manitoba, Colleen Rajat, ICT News.
When I was in college, I studied the Hawaiian language under the direction of Kumu Kau'i Peralto. It was to fulfill my university's foreign language requirement. Hawaiian, however, is not a foreign language, as there are still many speakers throughout the Hawaiian Islands and beyond. ICT Shirley Snavy was on Hawaii Island recently to learn about an organization that is committed to carrying on traditional ways through education and agriculture. Take a look.
It's paradise. Great weather, beautiful sunsets, and the ocean. But there's an undercurrent here in Hawaii of colonization and the effects of climate change. A nonprofit organization on the Big Island is taking matters into its own hands. Alika Jardin works in education for Hui Mau.
Our goal is to feed the people of our community, and especially focusing on the crops that our kupuna ate. Our diets changed a lot with the changing of cultures and languages here in Hawaii, and so it's one of our missions to create food systems that feed our kupuna and feed ourselves in the way that our kupuna did.
I was there for a board meeting of the Center for Rural Strategies. Its president is Dee Davis.
We want to be able to help projects on the island that are doing good work, that were respectful of tradition and of the island itself, and are there some experiences that would be good for the board and where we could be helpful to them.
We're the second biggest employer in our town outside of the school, the public school system, and we're only going to grow from here. I would say, so those are the active people within the organization that are hired to be here, but do way more than we're hired, they're here for, to be hired for. And it's more like a lifestyle, and we just, show up. But we have people from all over Hawaii. We bring in kids from the local school system. The high school is actually here today.
In the 1990s, after the decline of the sugar industry, thousands of acres on the Hamakua coast were planted in eucalyptus trees to stop a potential glut of real estate on the Big Island. But a deal to sell the trees to make paper in Japan fell through. Native Hawaiians were left with these very large stands of very tall trees that suck up the water from the aquifer. Hui Mau is on a mission to rid the island of this invasive species.
This is a pretty important ecosystem here on the Big Island. It's kind of the most rural island. It's a big island that you could put all the other Hawaiian islands in, and it's been important for us to try to be mindful of what the indigenous community is going through, and also to think about how we can be helpful in sustainable projects on the island. And so when we had the opportunity to go visit this somewhat quixotic, aspirational plan to put a marker down in the midst of this commercial eucalyptus forest that had just taken over, and that right after the time of the fires on Maui and here on the Big Island. And this eucalyptus is such a contributing factor to these kind of explosive maelstroms, these fires that are out of control. And so this was a chance to do something, try to be helpful, but really to learn.
I'm always surprised by the strength that people have to see beyond all of the really tall trees, the massive stands of eucalyptus trees that we're surrounded by, and to push up against it and say that they'll do what they can with their own gifts and their own particular capacities to show up every day and do what they can to chip away at it and create a better future. I think when we started the work, a lot of folks were like, this is impossible. There's like 6,000 eucalyptus trees per acre, and we're surrounded by 13,000 acres of eucalyptus. And so that's well into the hundreds of thousands of eucalyptus. And as an organization, you know, we see that our land, our aina, can feed us, but it means that we have to do the work in our lifetime. And I'm surprised every time, you know, we have a beautiful crew that is out on aina every day, but I'm surprised by their fearlessness, maybe, and their commitment. And I think now that was sort of in the beginning when the trees were very much still there, and we hadn't actually brought any down and done a lot of the reclamation work. But now that we're years into it, I feel that surprise isn't quite there anymore. I'm not really surprised by a lot of things that kind of unfold. There's so many moments where we're like, oh my gosh, I wish we had this to help us get there, and whatever that is always seems to show up.
I think it's a very good opportunity that a lot of us don't necessarily have, especially in the homes that and the spaces that we grew up in. I come from the islands that we can see from here, Maui and Lanai, and kind of made my way over here. And Huimau makes this a place where we are welcome to grow. And so we're very, very fortunate, especially as Native Hawaiians, to be able to come back to a place that maybe some of our ancestors came from, maybe not, and to establish ourselves for our future and our future generations.
Reporting from Pa'awilo on the Big Island of Hawaii, Shirley Snavy, ICT News.
Kevin McCarthy has officially become the first Speaker of the House to be kicked out of office in U.S. history. A small group of far-right Republicans, led by Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, successfully challenged McCarthy's leadership through a 216 to 210 vote. The drama was set when Democrats said they would not bail McCarthy out. Oklahoma Representative Tom Cole, who is a Chickasaw citizen and chairman of the Rules Committee, said the vote to remove McCarthy would result in chaos. Well, chaos or not, Congress must now fund the government by November 17th. So what's next, and how do we make sense of all of this? We turn to ICT regular contributor Holly Cook-Macaro for answers. She is the founding principal and president of The Angle, and she's also a board member of Indig Public Media, the parent company that owns ICT and the ICT Newscast. Hi, Holly. It's great to see you. Welcome back.
Hi, Leah. It's good to see you.
Let's jump right in here, and let's start with the Republicans. Democrats said they did not want to broker what they called a Republican civil war. Do you think that is what we're seeing right now?
I definitely think that the fissures within the Republican caucus were exposed for all of America yesterday. And what has really, it became clear that the ability to govern in their own caucus is practically impossible. I think we saw that if you look back at John Boehner's frustration when he resigned as Speaker of the House. And those were the Tea Party days. And he was really very frustrated with the inability of the caucus to come together, and really, you know, the extremists of wanting things one way and not even working with their own party, much less the other party. So what we're really seeing today is a result of deals cut on day one, when he passed a rules package really very much catering and empowering to the far right wing of the Republican Party.
One of the issues that Democrats raised was trust, and we saw McCarthy broke his deal with the president days after agreeing to a solution on the debt limit. And then he also has reached out repeatedly to the most conservative wing of his party on issues like an impeachment hearing for President Joe Biden. Do you think that Democrats can work with any of the GOP alternatives?
Well, certainly. I think there are really experienced legislative leaders in the Republican caucus, like Scalise, like Tom Emmer, like Indian Country's own Tom Cole, as you mentioned. But what is really the problem is the set of rules that the party passed on day one when they took over. Well, it wasn't exactly day one; it was in the first few weeks. But before McCarthy could become Speaker, he had to agree to a set of rules that empowered, that allowed one member to bring a motion to vacate, which is what Congressman Matt Gaetz did yesterday from Florida. And prior to that, it would have taken a vote from the entire caucus and would have been the majority leader or the minority leader that could do that. But it would have taken a consensus of the caucus. But when you empower just one member to bring that motion to vacate, and you have such a slim margin, it really means that you've put every speaker after McCarthy, no matter how good they are, no matter how trustworthy they are going to be as weak as Speaker McCarthy was yesterday when he lost a vote with just 8 of his own caucus voting against him. That is the foundation and the weakness here.
We know that right now it's Wednesday morning, we're speaking to one another, and there are many names being floated around right now, including former President Donald Trump to potentially be the Speaker of the House.
Yes, interestingly, the Constitution doesn't say that you have to be a member of the House to become Speaker. Now, I think it's unlikely that that will happen. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, has also been floated as Speaker of the House. But as was demonstrated yesterday, there is really not a sense of bipartisanship that I could see even, centrist, moderate Republicans joining with the entire Democratic caucus to elect Hakeem Jeffries. And I don't know that that former President Donald Trump could accomplish bring that his election across the finish line either. One thing I do want to note is one of the and talking about Indian Country's role in this. If you look back, and I referred to that rules package deal that had to be cut, but really this began in November when the Republicans weren't able. It was expected to be this red wave. It was really more of a a small ripple. And so when you they won enough seats to take over the House, but only with a margin of 5 votes. And that is because they couldn't take out people like Sharice Davids, member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, who was a top target for Republicans, a frontline, what Democrats call frontline. They're most vulnerable members in districts that are more conservative. And so Sharice Davids really had a lot to do with what happened yesterday, because the elections of 2022 left no wiggle room for Speaker McCarthy, either in negotiating becoming elected Speaker or negotiating any of these bills that really brought the motion to vacate from Congressman Gaetz yesterday.
As I mentioned earlier, we saw Representative Tom Cole, who is a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, give a really impassioned speech there on the House floor yesterday. Do you think there's any scenario in which Tom Cole puts his name out there and maybe becomes the Speaker of the House?
There's nothing I would like to see more than Tom Cole as Speaker of the House in this Republican majority. Congressman Cole is well-liked and respected on both sides of the aisle, has a demonstrated track record of bipartisanship and a successful legislator. He has, however, shot down any idea of running for Speaker, and probably partly because of the circus we saw yesterday and that vulnerability I mentioned that is built in right now to that really empowers that right wing. He is chair of one of the most powerful committees in the House, in an environment that he can manage a little better than trying to fight with that entire caucus. So I think Indian Country would greatly benefit if Tom Cole decided to throw his hat in. And who knows, right? We don't know if anyone can get elected in this atmosphere, but Tom Cole could be a consensus candidate. Let's all cross our fingers.
Holly, we only have about 30 seconds left here. So yes or no, do you think a week from now we will have a Speaker of the House?
No.
Well, we'll continue. We'll continue to watch that. As always, ICT regular contributor Holly Cook-Macaro, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah.
Be sure to join us on the next ICT Newscast when we get a peek at the new season of PBS's Native America series with the show's producers. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.